Ki, Prabhupada ki, Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Tagore Premanande. And could you bring the black folder over, please? Shishi Code Nitai Maprashashi ki Jai. Yeah. I see the poor appearance days tomorrow. Yeah. Reading from Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita. Chapter 6, Let There Be a Temple, Part 2. I shall be the last man to give up Hare Krishna land to the rogue Mr. N, Prabhupada wrote to a life member just before leaving Ahmedabad for Bombay. Prabhupada was now immediately planning how to rectify his disciples' mistake. No money had yet been transferred, so perhaps it was not too late. Mr. N could not possibly understand why Prabhupada was so determined in his fight to keep the Juhu land. Not that Prabhupada had kept his motives hidden, but only a devotee can understand the mind or actions of another devotee. Mr. N was dealing with Prabhupada just as he had dealt with C Company. He had cheated them, and now he would cheat ISKCON. He could only surmise that Prabhupada and his disciples were driven by the same motive as he himself, the only motive he could understand, material possessiveness. Actually, even Prabhupada's disciples were having difficulty understanding Prabhupada's unbreakable determination. Prabhupada's main motive was to preach Krishna consciousness in Bombay. Srila Prabhupada said, "My Guru Maharaj ordered me to preach Krishna consciousness in the West, and I have done that. Now I want to preach in India." Bombay was the most important city in India, the gateway, and within Bombay, Krishna had somehow led Prabhupada to this land, where he had begun preaching and brought the deities of Radha and Krishna. In Prabhupada's eyes, the land was suitable for the large, gorgeous temple and international hotel he had planned. Bombay was an important city and required grand temple worship, large festivals, mass prasad distribution, and a variety of Vedic cultural programs. The Juhu land seemed ideal for a school, a theatre, a library, apartments, a Hare Krishna city. So how could Prabhupada retreat from this rogue who was trying to cheat him? There would always be persons opposed to Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada said that did not mean the devotee should give in. The preacher had to be tolerant, and sometimes when all else failed and Krishna's interest was at stake, he had to fight. Another reason Prabhupada refused to give up this particular plot of land was that he had promised the deities Radha Rasavihari. He had invited Krishna here and prayed, "Dear sir, please stay here and I will build you a beautiful temple." So if using the land for missionary work was the obvious or external reason for Prabhupada's determination to keep his Hare Krishna land, then the internal reason was his personal commitment to their lordships, Shri Radha Rasavihari. Prabhupada's fighting spirit to keep the land was so keen that he sometimes appeared to be fighting for fighting's sake. He sometimes even compared Mr. N to the demon Kamsa in Srimad Bhagavatam, who had repeatedly tried to kill Krishna. Just as Kamsa had employed many minor demons in his attempt to kill Krishna, so Mr. N had employed demonic agents like lawyers, friends, and hoodlums. Krishna's killing of demons like Kamsa was his pastime or lila. He enjoyed it. And Prabhupada, as a servant of Krishna, was fully absorbed in this fighting. He was vigilant and militant. When Mr. N bluffed or frightened the devotees, causing them to back down, Prabhupada held his ground. He took naturally to the fight. Krishna and Krishna's mission was being challenged. Srila Prabhupada ki. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. From Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 15, Text 26. This chapter is called Narad and Angira instruct King Chitraketu. Tasmat swastena manasa. Tasmat swastena manasa. Vimrishya gatim atmana. Vimrishya gatim atmana. Dvaite dhruvarta vishrambam. Dvaite dhruvarta vishrambam. Tyajupashanam avisha. Twajupashamam avisha. Tasmat swastena manasa. Vimrishya gatim atmana. Dvaiti dhruvarta vishrambam. Tyajopashamam avisha. Tasmat swastena manasha. Vimrishya gatim atmana. Dvaiti dhruvarta vishrambam. Tyajopashamam avisha. Tasmat swastena manasa. Vimrishya gatim atmana. Dvaiti dhruvarta vishrambam. Tyajupashamam avisha. Let's chant. Tasmat, therefore, swastena, with a careful manasa, mind, vimrishya, considering gatim, real position, atmana, of yourself, dvaite, in the duality, dhruva, as permanent, arta, object, vishrambam, belief, tyaja, give up, upashamam, peaceful condition, avisha, take two. Translation. Therefore, King Chitraketu, carefully consider the position of the Atma. In other words, try to understand who you are, whether body, mind, or soul. Consider where you have come from, where you are going after giving up this body, and why you are under the control of material limitation. Try to understand your real position in this way, and then you will be able to give up your unnecessary attachment. You will also be able to give up the belief that this material world or anything not directly in touch with service to Krishna is eternal. Thus you will obtain peace. Please repeat. Therefore, O King Chitraketu, carefully consider the position of the Atma. In other words, try to understand who you are, whether body, mind, or soul. Consider where you have come from, where you are going after giving up this body, and why you are under the control of material limitation. Try to understand your real position in this way, and then you will be able to give up your unnecessary attachment. You will also be able to give up the belief that this material world or anything not directly in touch with service to Krishna is eternal. Thus you will obtain peace. Srila Prabhupada's purport. The Krishna consciousness movement is factually endeavoring to bring human society to a sober condition. Because of a misdirected civilization, people are jumping in material life like cats and dogs, performing all sorts of abominable, sinful actions and becoming increasingly entangled. The Krishna consciousness movement includes self-realization because one is first directed by Lord Krishna to understand that one is not the body, but the owner of the body. When one understands this simple fact, he can direct himself toward the goal of life, because people are not educated in terms of the goal of life. They are working like madmen and becoming more and more attached to the material atmosphere. Misguided man accepts the material condition as everlasting. One must give up his faith in material things and give up attachment for them. Then one will be sober and peaceful. Om Jnanatimrandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chakramalitam Yana Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Kam Karoti Vachalam Pangam Lagate Garim Nyatipattamaham Vande Shri Gurindinitharanam Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Shri Advaita Gadadhar Siva Sadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Ram Ram Hare Hare. Therefore, O King Chitraketu, carefully consider the position of the Atma. In other words, try to understand who you are, whether body, mind, or soul. Consider where you have come from, where you're going after giving up this body, and why you're under the control of material limitation. Try to understand your real position in this way, and then you will be able to give up your unnecessary attachment. You will also be able to give up the belief that this material world or anything not directly in touch with service to Krishna is eternal, thus you will obtain peace. So many lectures, Srila Prabhupada would mention that this Krishna consciousness movement is the only cure for misdirected civilization. In interesting terms, Prabhupada uses here, they're jumping in materialistic life like cats and dogs. What would that jumping mean? Anybody like to say what it would mean to them when they hear that? Acha.
Like some dog is desperate for some treat from its owner, so he's performing all sort of ridiculous tricks, and so it's a bit of an embarrassment really. It's just for a tiny morsel of food because it feels that's the only way it can get it.
Yeah, that's very good. The sad life of cats and dogs is they're depending on, especially dogs, they're depending on treats from their master. And sometimes they'll roll over or beg or give a paw so they can get some treat. They learn some tricks. And this is what happens. We go to the educational establishments and we learn some tricks so we can go begging with our diploma. Prabhupada talks about this, that we spend so much time getting educated and then we get our diploma between our teeth and we go begging, please give me a job. And what we're going begging for? Material energy is actually humiliating us, having to go begging for a job so that we can get the things which we don't really need. We're living, as Prabhupada called it, this so-called puffed up life. It's an interesting term that used, so-called puffed up life. So it's expanding the bodily necessities. So there's a nice book there called Intellectual Animalism. It's a BBT book. It's not so popular, but it shows you to the extent that people go to protect their material life, some demoniac things that they do. For example, killing children within the womb. They just give it a name, and then the different parts of the child's body, they give it a number. And when they're destroying it, they just say, oh, that's number 1 out, and that's number 2 out. And they're referring to the different parts of the body. It's quite a horrific experience, obviously. And to dehumanize it, desensitize it, then they just give it a different name. So many things like that, they try to desensitize it, because by nature the soul is sensitive to these things. We have the knowledge that so many things are wrong. But if we give it a different name and we try to back up with some science, then it seems like it's okay. So therefore people are being misled, misdirected civilization. And who's going to say it? Who's going to speak against it? The devotees have to do that. They have to tell them that these things are wrong, which they're doing. They're looking for happiness, but the things they're doing are not going to bring them happiness. They're going to bring about great calamity, individually and collectively. And human life is not meant to be dancing like the dogs. Prabhupada called it, he was very happy with the way the devotees were dancing in kirtan. He's not like this Western dog dancing. So whatever it means by that. But sometimes you might see, some people dancing, and what is the purpose of their dance? It's simply to attract the opposite member of the sex, So, of course, physically they may be dancing in the nightclubs, but so many other things they're doing, they're dancing. It's all a big elaborate mating call of the human human being. And you see this in the animal kingdom. Sometimes they do some very elaborate type of exhibits to attract the opposite sex. And then a few seconds later it's over. So they make such big elaborate plans and arrangements simply to engage in animal propensities, eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. Prabhupada says that eating, we may eat off a gold plate or may eat off of a paper plate. It doesn't really matter what you're eating, though. That's the important thing. If we're eating something which is going to bring us some bad karma, then eating some slaughtered animal on a gold plate is not a high-class thing. Sometimes people are led to believe that people who live in very expensive apartments and they have the finest china, or they've got wonderful material opulences surrounding them, that they must be high class. But if they're eating dead animals, that's not high class. Their understanding of what is class is completely materialistic, and not even that, but it's very much in the mode of ignorance. And mating, then the human beings make some elaborate arrangements for that, whereas the animals, they simply do it when the need is there. Not advocating that humans should just do it when need is there, regardless of time, place, and circumstance, but they make some big elaborate arrangements. And sleeping, one may sleep. Prabhupada says you could sleep in a gold bed, but when you're asleep, you don't even know where you are. You're dreaming, you're somewhere else. In your sleep, you might be in some other place. You might even be dreaming that you're sleeping in a flea-bitten mattress. So and then defending. The animal defends with its claws, and we defend with weapons like rifles and bombs, etc. So the advancement of civilization is not to simply become more polished in these animal propensities, but to gradually reduce them to zero. So the Krishna conscious movement can do whatever ashram one is in, whatever walk of life one is in. If we take to this Krishna conscious movement, then we can gradually bring this senses to, if not zero, then we try to minimize. But the main thing here, which is in the purport, is that you will also be able to give up the belief that this material world or anything not directed in touch with Krishna, Krishna's service is eternal. So we can use everything in Krishna's service, and this here it says, thus you will obtain peace. So by utilizing in Krishna's service, then we'll get peace. But it has to be in Krishna's service. And how do we know it's in Krishna's service? Because it's called prescribed duties. If what we're doing is not prescribed by some authority, then it's not in Krishna's service, no matter what mental concoction we make of it. And how do we know it's in Krishna's service? We get authorized by some authority. Otherwise, it's simply on the platform of the mind, and that can lead to so much calamity. So in the material world, the misguided people are accepting material conditioning as permanent. Just like we've heard so many times, the most amazing thing in the material world, it's not one of the 7 wonders of the world. It's not the Eiffel Tower or the Taj Mahal or the Hanging Gardens of Babylon or whatever they happen to be at the moment. I don't know if the 7 worlds are the same as they used to be when I was a kid. And sometimes people put great effort into trying to knock one of the 7 worlds, 7 wonders of the world off and make something which they can be famous for by putting it into one of the 7 wonders of the world. Like just now, they're planning to build a city somewhere in the Middle East. I can't remember if it was Dubai. And the city is basically it's like miles and miles of this long mirrored eco place. But there's so many complications are going to come around of that. Anyway, and part of the motivation is simply to become famous in some way for producing such a thing. But ultimately, what's the value of it? It's not lasting. And even if they get some reputation for it, then that's not lasting either. In due course of time, everything crumbles back to where it came from, dust to dust. So the most amazing thing is not one of the 7 wonders of the world or something of this material world. The most amazing thing is that despite the fact that we see that other embodied living entities, their term is coming to an end. Regularly we see some dead animal on the road or bugs on the windscreen, or you see a funeral procession or someone close to us passes away. So there's so many warnings there. And are we taking the warnings? There's that story of the person who wanted to make friends with Yamaraj because Yamaraj is the Lord of Death. He thought, well, if I can make friends with him, then I won't have to be under his punishment. So somehow or another he managed to make friends with him, and he says, oh, okay, before it's my death, can you give me some warnings? And Yamaraj says, yes, certainly I can do that. So he went back to his life, and he lived his life, and at the end he died, and he went to Yamaraj, and he says, what am I doing here? He says, I thought you were going to give me some warnings. He says, I did. Didn't you see the crow's feet in your eyes? Didn't you see the grey hairs? Didn't you see the ailing organs? Didn't you see other people dying round about you? These are so many warnings I gave you. I gave you so many notices. Just like sometimes you get a notice to quit if you're living in a house and you don't pay your rent, or you don't treat the place properly and you contravene the rental agreement, then you may get a notice to quit, which means you have to prepare for your next place. But if you ignore that notice to quit, then the bailiffs come and take you out, and then you may be forced with no place to go, or you may be put into some place which is certainly without much preparation. It's a human form of life. Every day we're getting warnings of notice to quit, that someday we're going to have to quit this apartment, this body, and we should make a plan for where we're going after this so that it's not a worse place, it's a better place. And the best plan is to take to Krishna consciousness, properly take to Krishna consciousness, so that it becomes natural. But at the end of this life, that our attraction to service to Krishna is natural. You can't fake that. There has to be a lot of effort put in, so that we clear the anarthas from our heart. If our anarthas are rooted in this material world, and we think we're the controller, so many things we do which we think we're controller. We're trying to control our destiny. We're trying to control the justice of the world. We're trying to control our sense gratification. But we get absorbed in these distractions. The time of death comes and we haven't prepared for the real thing, which we had some control over, which was to direct our mind and senses in the service of the Lord and to submit to the instructions of the spiritual master and the authorities. And then when we do that, then as time goes by, then devotional service becomes attractive, so much attractive that we have no interest in the material world. We've left it behind. And there's this Christian prayer, the Lord's Prayer, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So in the spiritual world, they're performing spontaneous devotional service, and we have the opportunity to engage in sadhana bhakti, which will lead us to that spontaneous devotional service. And along the way, there may be so many traps, there may be so many distractions. And if we give in to them, it could be lifetimes before we're back again at the same place. So we have to take direction in such a way which is going to help us avoid these traps, and so that we can continue with our unmotivated and uninterrupted devotional service. So the Krishna conscious movement includes self-realization, because one is first directed by Lord Krishna to understand one is not the body, but the owner of the body. And we see from the Bhagavad Gita, through the first canto, through the 10th canto, through Chaitanya Charitamrita, Prabhupada reiterates this time and time again. He doesn't let us forget this, because it's foolish to think that we've become more advanced when we haven't even understood and acting on the platform that we're not this body. It's no small thing to go over that, because we've been in this bodily concept of life for such a long, long time that it's so... See, it's a particular it's not the particular body we're attached to, it's the bodily concept of life and all it stands for. The enjoying separately from Krishna, having so-called freedom. Now this freedom, as Ashish Prabhu was saying in class the other day, there was three things. As we praying to the Lord that we don't have this freedom to become distracted. Idle mind is the devil's workshop. That's, what was the other two things? You're praying about not giving too many options, because sometimes we have so many options we can't choose any of them, or we choose the wrong one. And that's right. So when we surrender to the spiritual master, we're saying, my time is yours, my body is yours, my mind is yours, intelligence is yours, please direct me. And just as when you give in charity to the Brahmin, giving charity to the spiritual master, you don't later on say, oh, give me it back, I've changed my mind, I want that donation back. That's the story about that King Nriga, who was one devotee had found him in a well as a lizard, wasn't it? And it came about that he had even mistakenly taken back a cow that he'd donated. He was actually such a pious person, he was giving cows, but by mistake, he took a cow back. And the person complained about it, and he got a reaction. So when we surrender to the spiritual master, that means that we're saying that, and now I'm your extension, I'm one of your limbs, please engage me accordingly. But when we act independently, then we're not acting under the direction of the spiritual master, and we don't have that protection, and we break that connection. So this is such an important thing that when Dhruva Maharaj was performing in austerities, and Narada Muni went to Lord Vishnu to appeal on behalf of the demigods that the austerities of Dhruva Maharaj were causing so much havoc in the material world. And he asked him to come and give him darshan because this was the purpose of his austerities. And the first thing Lord Vishnu asked is, who is his spiritual master? Narada Muni replied, I am. He'd given him the mantra, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. And he says, yes, okay, I'll go and see him. And this is the difference between the divine and the demoniac. When had it been that Dhruva Maharaj was just doing this without the connection and authorization of the spiritual master, Narada Muni actually directed him. He already knew how to perform austerities to the point that he was causing so much disturbance in the universe. And had he not accepted Narada Muni and he was simply following his own cause, then it would have been termed as a demoniac endeavor. But because he was under the direction, the guidance and protection of a spiritual master, Narada Muni, then he got the blessings of the Lord. So this is a very nice lesson for us. And this is the Krishna conscious movement, that we learn how to do all the things in devotional service, which we may have used before. Previously, we may have been jumping in material life like cats and dogs, performing all sorts of activities, some abominable, sinful, and increasingly entangled. But many of the same activities we can engage in Krishna's service under the direction of the spiritual master. And if we're unsure, we should ask. If we act on our own accord, then it can be havoc. It can create havoc for ourselves and others. And so therefore it's important that we can be assured that our activities are authorized. And if we're unsure, then we should speak directly to the spiritual master. And in this way, we can become free from this misdirected civilization. Now, of course, in the material world, people don't want to take a spiritual master because they think they know better. I remember when I first heard about this thing about guru, then I was like, well, I don't need a guru. Why do I need somebody to tell me what to do? I've had enough people tell me what to do all my life. I want to decide for myself. But then when I came to understand it and also had a few lessons, I realized that actually I need this direction. I need that shelter. And you can even experiment. It's like if we make sure that everything we're doing is authorized, then we can feel secure in what we're doing. But it has to be authorized from the right person. It can't just be like we cherry pick and we find someone who will authorize it and it creates havoc. That's not the right thing. If it's increasing our love for Krishna and it's increasing our attachment to following the order of the spiritual master, then what we're doing is good. And if we're becoming more independent, then that's not such a good thing. That's us backpedaling. So to understand that we're not this body means, for a devotee, it doesn't just mean jnana, understanding, like theoretical, intellectual understanding, and learning so many different arguments, logical, etc. For a devotee, it means understanding that we're something else, and that something else is Jivera Swarupahoy, Krishnera Nityadas, Krishnera Tatasta Shakti, Veda Veda Prakash. So this is the real understanding of Atma. I think it was mentioned in the verse itself. Yep. The King Chitraketu was asked to carefully consider the position of the Atma. In other words, try to understand who you are, whether body, mind, or soul. So sometimes the Atma is referred to as the body, sometimes referred to as the mind, sometimes the soul. And for different reasons, sometimes it's because someone is in the bodily concept, or sometimes someone is in a little bit more elevated, where they connect with the more subtle body, the mind, intelligence, false ego. And then the real platform is to understand that the self is the Atma, beyond the body and the mind, but the soul or consciousness. And mind is not consciousness, mind is simply a faculty. But also sometimes we refer to the body, mind and soul as self because it's simply for convenience sake. It's like if someone, it's quite funny sometimes the way devotees speak, they say, Prabhu, how old is your body? You know, it just sounds quite, I mean, it's true, philosophically it's true. But in one sense, if you want to be even more philosophical, you could say as old as any other material element in the universe, because everything's been here since the start and it'll be here at the end. So in that sense, you know, the conception of someone being certain age is simply because it's like when you're born, the clock ticks, and then it ticks, and this is how we denote our age. So sometimes they will try to be philosophical because they don't want to be in the bodily concept of life by saying, Prabhu, how old are you? Or where are you from? And the devotee says, I'm from the spiritual world. And we know what they mean. We're not asking, you know, where are you from originally, as in before you came to the UK, or before you were born in this particular body with this particular culture or race. So this is, Prabhupada calls it conventional terms. So first, Krishna is saying, Asochanam vasochas tvam pragya vidam shabasha se agadasun agatasum chananu shochanti panditaha. To Arjuna, he says, while speaking learned words, you are mourning for that which is not worthy of grief. Those who are wise lament neither for the living nor for the dead. And then the next verse he says, can we remember? Atvevaham chatunasam. Exactly. Never was there a time that when I did not exist, nor you nor all these kings, and none in the future shall any of us cease to be. And in the purport, Prabhupada says that having established that we're not the body, then Krishna doesn't then again go back to conventional terms. In philosophy, then you go from one, you establish one thing and building up. It's like building up a case or going up a ladder, and then you bring it to the next point. It's not like you're not the body and then goes back to bodily concept terms again. He's progressively bringing more lessons. So first of all, he's saying you're not the body, and neither are all these, and neither shall they cease to be, and they're all eternal individuals. This is the point he's making. So, but Prabhupada talks about conventional terms. He said he's not then again going back to conventional terms, as in bodily concept or body terms. So sometimes for convenience sake, we'll say things like that. And we have to understand it, especially when we're dealing with guests. Like Kontia has this book, Super Sunday, which is really good. And it shows you an example. And we've seen some of these examples ourselves here. So one devotee goes up to one new guest and basically says, Haribol Mataji, have you respected? Now, she doesn't know who Mataji is. She's thinking, does he think I'm somebody else? And Haribol, who's Haribol? And who's Mataji? And respected who? Who have I supposed to have respected? Have I offended somebody? No, have I disrespected somebody? And then someone else comes in and says, have you had something to eat? And so we also seen something similar here, where one devotee was referring to one guest as Mataji. And now it's fine, we should show respect, but if they don't understand these terms, it just creates confusion. It's already a big step for people to come to the temple, and we have to make it easy for them by not engaging them in the local dirty laundry politics, by not giving them jargon which they don't understand, by trying to make their life as simple as possible. For example, they come into the temple, and you say, have a seat, and the temple's bare, and there's no seats there. That was another one. Or someone, you can see obviously someone struggling, sitting cross-legged. They may have a short skirt, or they may have tight jeans, and they're struggling. It looks like they've never sat cross-legged in their life. So we have to be attentive to these things and go and find them a chair, make it so that their stay is comfortable, so that they want to come back again, and make it attractive to them. And preaching to them also, it's not that we just go in there and say, did you know they didn't land on the moon? Or have you read the 5th canto? Or we go on about some heavy, controversial subject, which is like the latest flavour of the day in ISKCON. These things, we put these things aside. These are internal things. But we find out more about them. What are they interested in? What books have they read of Srila Prabhupada? And no matter which one, as you say, it's a very nice book. And then you speak about that. And that's why it's important for us to read them as well, so we know what's in the book and we can understand what they're relating to. What we'll try to find out is what are they relating to, which has piqued an interest in them to bring them here. And then we try to support that, we try to build that up. And we're very careful not to say or do something which is going to cause them to doubt or to not return. So whether they come to the temple or whether we find them at some house program or we find them at some other outside venue, then this should always be our concern, is how to improve their faith. Even Prabhupada says that other people of other faiths, we shouldn't say anything which disturbs their faith. What to speak if they're coming to Krishna consciousness? It's not that we should insult them or put down their faith. Whatever they believe in, we should try to cultivate that, try to fan that spark so they become more faithful to Krishna. So we see here, this is the great service of Narada Muni and Angira Muni, as that they take the opportunity to preach Krishna consciousness, so someone gets a very nice lesson and they leave behind their life of illusion. So this whole thing has been a blessing to Maharaj Chitraketu and his wife, a blessing in disguise. And they didn't know that they were looking for a blessing of a son, which they got for a short period of time, but a more valuable blessing came to them they weren't looking for, which actually was for their eternal well-being. And sometimes this is the case in life. We have to be open to Krishna's plan so that we can see what lesson there is for us to learn for our own personal growing in Krishna consciousness. Are we going to become more humble? Are we going to become more enthusiastic in our service? If these things are there, that's a good sign. If we're becoming more cooperative, etc. But if the opposite is happening, that's not such a good sign. So Prabhupada calls this, he has this term, material atmosphere. In the purport to the Mahamantra, Srila Prabhupada talks about being contaminated by material atmosphere. So he's actually giving the living entities the benefit of the doubt. He's not blaming them. He's saying that by contact with material atmosphere since time immemorial, then we've become under the control of our perplexities, and the more we try to lord it over, the more we become entangled in our complexities. So Prabhupada's given the living entity a way out, that we don't have to bog ourselves down with guilt and blame, but just take properly to this process of hearing and chanting and serving. And that we can leave this life behind, this material conditional life behind, by taking to the activities of the Krishna conscious movement. So by engaging in this endeavour to bring human society to a sober condition, by engaging in that, we're engaging in the Lord's mission And the Lord's mission is his Leela, it's his pastimes. We can become an instrument in his hands and bring about auspiciousness in our life. So we'll just stop there. Anyone any questions or comments?
Thanks, Prabhu. If you could maybe give some just sort of practical tips of how to speed up the realization that we're not the body.
How to speed it up?
Yeah.
Interesting answer for you. By being patient. Sometimes this is the thing, is we're impatient. So, sometimes people impatient and then they become sahajas, or they find some other distraction and they give up on the process, either totally or by being distracted by the flowery words of the Vedas, by getting into the Yuga Dharma is Harinam Sankirtan, spreading the holy name of the Lord. And through different activities of Krishna conscious movement, we do that. But if one becomes distracted by simply doing other things, like making a living out of doing some other type of thing, which is very kind of vaguely related to the Vedic civilization, but not necessarily going to spread the Krishna conscious movement. I guess it all comes down from attentive hearing and chanting. Wherever the mind wanders, bring it back under the control of our attention to higher self. And to be vigilant, to not allow ourselves to be involved in something which is going to distract us from that goal. Bhogaishwarya prasaktanam tai pratichetasam. So we come to this movement, we already are attached to Bhoga and Aishwarya, material sense, enjoyment and opulence. And we may not have, to begin with, an attraction for Krishna consciousness, but we have some theoretical understanding. So we have to engage steadfastly and with vigilance to protect the Bhakti-lata Bij. If we can, I'd probably say this whole movement is running off of utsaha, enthusiasm. So if we can find inspiration, there's so many sources of inspiration which will give us enthusiasm to engage in this mission. And there may be some things we're inclined to and some things which we're not so inclined to, but we have to try to come to the point. We have to endeavor so that we come to the point where we're equally enthusiastic about anything which is asked of us, so that, see, that Krishna is interested in the effort and the endeavor. If the endeavor is pure, if the endeavor is authorized, and we make that continued endeavor despite our own shortcomings, then Krishna is very attracted by that. So if we become familiar with the lessons of the Nectar of Instruction, that is, Srila Rupa Goswami explains what assures the complete success of devotional service. And he outlines the things which are also detrimental, so we can learn these things, which is things which are favorable ways to associate with devotees, and different levels of devotees, how we can associate with them, the things which are distractions in devotional service, and the things which are conducive. So these things we should become familiar with. And we can analyze our life and see, am I doing some things which are detrimental to my cultivation of Bhakti-lata Bij? And if there is, then we have to be brave enough to do something about that. If we're not sure, then we can approach someone else and ask for the direction on that. Okay. Anything else, anyone? Ashish.
Thank you, Prabhu, for the class. So, how to preach in a way people are into education, going to school, college, uni, taking diplomas and all, and also coming with various faiths. So how to come across, as in it's not offending as well, and the message of Krishna consciousness comes through, and people are inspired to take Krishna consciousness, and alongside with the studies, education, they may continue practice, they may take and continue practice Krishna consciousness.
Yes, we have to think very carefully. Desha, Kala, and Patra, time, place, and circumstances, or time, place, and candidate. We have to consider using language which doesn't offend them, saying things. If we know people are attached to a certain concept, unless we are really acquainted with and we're confident that we can go the full distance to an argument with them, then we have to be careful not to disturb whatever interest they may have. So, for example, Prabhupada was giving a lecture, people were heckling, and he stopped talking. He just told the devotees, Kirtan Prasadam, he says, don't bother speaking. So if, in this way, it's not that Prabhupada gave up on them, but he could understand that it wasn't going to make them favourable. So they just let them chant Kirtan and give them Prasadam. That will help them. And then they'll come to the point where they can engage in some straightforward talking. Also, when we read Srila Prabhupada's books, so take, for example, if you're dealing with the scientific community or the question of evolution, then there's two ways you can approach that. You can approach it from their terms, all the terms which they use, and from scientific terms like the Bhaktivedanta Institute. And you can learn it better than they know, so that they can't tie you up with fancy words. And learn their philosophy. This is one way. What's that term called? When you learn someone's philosophy and then you learn it so well that you can speak it, but you also know what's beyond it. What's that term called? Can't remember. So you're learning it. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur used to do that. He would speak various philosophies and then he'd argue against it himself. So when we're reading, we're purposefully trying to find ammo. We're like shopping for ammo, so that when we're out preaching in different places, if we're going to university and we've got certain presentations, then we want the ammo which will be able to counter their ignorance with higher knowledge. So there's that way is where you can learn it from like the technical side of it, and the other way is to learn logical and common sense things. So, for example, back to the scientific community, if you read Srila Prabhupada's Life Comes from Life, which is a compilation of morning walks transcribed, and we see Srila Prabhupada makes it so simple and easy that with confidence a devotee can go and speak in any circles. So the purpose of our reading is not just to hide behind a book so we don't have to do something else, or so that we can get this qualification or that qualification. Purpose is first of all to convince ourselves, and convincing ourselves so that we can go and convince others. If we can't convince others, it means that we also are still somewhat affected by that doubt. And Prabhupada also sometimes he'd refer to the Indian community, because although they have much knowledge of the Vedic civilization, sometimes due to a poor fund of knowledge is the term he used to use. He wasn't blaming them again. Due to a poor fund of knowledge, they do not know that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They think that all gods are equal like this. And then he'd quote some Shastra. So he's giving that knowledge so they're no longer in a poor fund of knowledge. So typically, people are hearing every day things which are being accepted as undeniable absolute truth. That the theory of evolution is just spoken of as if it's a foregone conclusion, as if it's a fact. But there's so many anomalies to this theory, it still remains a theory. They haven't proven it, but people are buying it up. Just like in that Radio Ram, there's a cafe where they sell soup of the day, and people are going in to buy it, and many of the students come in at lunchtime to buy it. And the soup of the day is called primordial soup. And someone says, "Oh, very nice soup. Who made it?" Nobody makes it. It's just there every day. And so anyway, that's quite interesting. So there's a lot of information there which can help us to become strong in our preaching. If we're preaching in certain circles, then we learn some of their language so we can understand what they're talking about. But my own personal thing is, yeah, you can learn a certain amount of it, but if you really want to get into it in great depth, then you would have to go and specialize in that. Not everybody is equipped to specialize in that. So, for example, Sadhaputta, who was a very senior devotee in the Bhaktivedanta Institute, then he was doing things like lecturing in Cambridge University to gain credentials so that he could move in scientific circles to introduce alternatives to their philosophies and their theories. And he was making great progress. Bhaktivedanta Institute have done like that. But, for us guys on the street, then it's a certain amount of that is required so we know what their arguments are. But with common sense and logic, then we can arm ourselves to defeat their doubts. Is that okay? We better stop there. Iskon Guru Vinda Ki, Srila Prabhupada Ki, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki, Tagore Premanande. Back to Vinda Ki.